Good evening and welcome to Qnews special coverage. Tonight, Syria is set to unveil a new Ministry of Defense structure with plans to strengthen state control over weapons and combat terrorism. While in Gaza, the humanitarian crisis deepens as the region faces new attacks and harsh winter conditions that threaten the lives of displaced Palestinians. Stay tuned as we bring you these stories and more, providing critical insights and updates on the ground. Syrian military operations chief Ahmed al-Shara has announced that the new structure of the Ministry of Defense and the Syrian army will be revealed in the coming days. In a press conference with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan in Damascus, al-Shara called for international sanctions on Syria to be lifted, citing the country's destroyed infrastructure. He stressed that the new Syrian government would not allow any terrorist organizations to exist within the Syrian territory. He also stated that no weapon would remain outside the state control, referring to agreements with factions on a unified command and the establishment of the Ministry of Defense. Meanwhile, Fidan emphasized that a new Syrian constitution is necessary to protect all sects in Syria. Syrian military operations chief Ahmed al-Shara has met with former Vice President Farouk al-Shara and invited him to attend an upcoming National Dialogue conference. Sources have said that since arriving in Damascus, Ahmed al-Shara visited Farouk al-Shara at his residence in a suburb of Damascus to extend the invitation for the upcoming conference. Syrian military operation Chief Ahmed al-Shara has affirmed that Syria remains neutral and respects Lebanon's sovereignty and security. Al-Shara has met with former leader of Lebanese Progressive Socialist Party Walid Jumblat in Damascus to discuss the future of Syrian-Lebanese relations. Al-Shara highlighted Lebanon's need for a strong economy and political stability. He emphasized that the Syrian government will not interfere in Lebanon's affairs. Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein has expressed Iraq's hopes for an inclusive political process that leads to stability in Syria. During a meeting with the Iraq-Oman Joint Committee, Hussein emphasized that Baghdad is closely monitoring the situation in Syria. He stressed the importance of helping the Syrian people build a stable and inclusive political process that represents all components of the society, ensuring stability and reducing tensions. Hussein also reiterated Iraq's support for a ceasefire in Gaza and the urgent delivery of humanitarian aid to assist affected civilians. Israeli occupation forces have continued operations along the Syria-Israel ceasefire line in the Golan Heights after the United Nations Security Council extended its long-running peacekeeping mission between both sides. The UN mission was extended for 6 months, with the Security Council expressing concern that military activities in the area could escalate tensions. And for further analysis on the situation in Syria, we're joined from Cairo by head of the Unit of Arab Regional Strategic Studies at Al-Ahram Center, Dr. Mohammed Aiz al-Arab. Good evening to you, Mr. Mohammed. And how do you view the new appointments in the Syrian government?
The new cascading appointments that are executed by Ahmed al-Shara the head of the coalition of militant factions in Syria after the ouster of al-Assad regime to a number of things. They refer to the fact that those who have Islamic tendencies tend to preside over the government in comparison to any other liberal sects, national sects, or even independent sects inside of Syria. The second indicator here to these appointments is that there is an attempt from the end of Ahmed al-Shara and his affiliated militant sects to actually do appointments that are not consistent with those done under the or during the rule of al-Assad. This, in fact, shows or for over a decade, there was a lot of fighting between these opposing sects and al-Assad regime, and I believe this drove these appointments while. The other thing is that this government is a transitional one, which is going to operate from 3 to 6 months. And this makes it more of a caretaker government, a transitional one, in order that is mandated to caretake and run the affairs of the state until a new constitution is drafted, and in order to or this government is formulated once more in a way that includes different minorities and social spectra in Syria. The other thing is I would like to refer to is that the international community.
That was exactly my second question to me, which is how do you assess the international community's response towards this whole new situation in Syria?
The international community can be assessed to be a pragmatic one. A pragmatic approach that is just trying to cope with the new variables in the political scene in Syria. You know, a regime was ousted, and so there had to be some kind of a response, a conducive response from the international community. Around 20,000 of Syrian territories are controlled by democratic Syrian forces, while a smaller percentage are being controlled by other sects that are far from being affiliated with the ruling sect. And so pragmatism here is what rules the scene. As well, there is movement from regional and Western elements, some of which had strong affinities and relations with Assad, and some others didn't. The United States and some other Western countries like Britain, like France, like the United Nations, you know, all of them right now have representatives trying to take place in the because they do not want chaos and absolute anarchy to rule the situation in Syria, and this and some international forces have a conviction that when they waiver some economic sanctions, imposed on Golani and Hayat Tahrir Sham, in fact, are necessary in order to contain these new sects and in order for these forces as well, for the West thinks that this is as well important in order not to let Russia have great influence inside of the new Syria.
Now, what's your take on the meeting that took place between Ahmed Shara and the former Syrian vice president and his invitation to participate in the national dialogue?
There is an orientation from the end of al-Shara to engage some elements that were pro-Bashar regime that at the time visited the interactions and the dynamics of the regime long ago. In fact, we all know the exclusion of Farouk al-Shara in this context. And so this is just an attempt to include the representatives of the old regime that didn't carry assaults on the people. And I'm talking about elements that are not appointed in security positions or in the military. The other point I would like to refer to is that the Syrian regime right now is giving a message that it is ready to endorse new political currents that are varied in ideologies and that they are right now trying to endorse new calibers that have not been convicted of bloodshed in Syria in the past. And the Syrian government is right to give a message that it is the previous page and that it is not going to endorse any person who has Syrian blood on their hands, whether from the intelligence authorities, from the military authorities, or the security authorities. And so, right now, what's happening to Ahmed al-Shara and his engagement of that is just an indicator that he is trying to send a message to the Syrian people in order to instill confidence and peace in their minds that this is a government that is
here ask how might all the developments that are occurring in Syria, including the US involvement, affect the geopolitical balance in the Middle East?
In fact, what's happening is going to definitely affect political conditions in the region. And Turkey is considered the winner in this scene. It has relations with militant sects that are now ruling Syria. Turkey was able to act a regime that it has been trying to for a decade and a half nearly, and it is now supporting the ruling sects to impose control over at Halab, all to Damascus. And right now, Turkey is the biggest, and the biggest loser here as a regional force is Iran, because Iran has lost a regime that was pro-Iran, and Iran had some economic project running under auspices of the Assad regime, and right now Iran has lost a lot by the nature of al-Assad regime and the diminishing of Hezbollah as well.
Indeed. Still remains to be seen the involvement the group that was Mohammed Aiz Al Arab, head of the Arab Regional Strategic Studies Unit at Al Ahram Center. We thank you so much for your insights. And now we move to the latest developments in Gaza. 5 Palestinians were killed and several others injured in an Israeli strike on a home in Deir al-Balah, central Gaza. According to Palestinian media, Israeli fighter jets targeted the home, leaving several women and children among the casualties. Rescue teams are still combing through the rubble in search of missing individuals. Israeli forces have intensified their attacks on Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza. Since Saturday evening, the hospital, a critical lifeline for thousands, has faced direct bombing, artillery shelling, and sniper fire. The assaults have caused severe damage, endangering the lives of patients and medical staff. Winter has arrived in Gaza, leaving nearly 2 million displaced Palestinians struggling against the wind, cold, and rain. Severe shortages of blanket, warm clothing, and firewood are compounding the crisis as shelters and makeshift tents have deteriorated after months of use. The United Nations has warned that many living in these precarious conditions may not survive the winter, noting that at least 945,000 people urgently need winter supplies, which remain out of reach for most due to soaring prices in Gaza. United Nations Relief and Works Agency spokesperson Adnan Abu Hassana has confirmed that Sweden's decision to cut funding for the agency will have a major impact on education across the 5 regions it operates, including Gaza. Abu Hassana emphasized the severe consequences of this financial shortfall on the education of Palestinian refugees, warning that it exacerbates the already critical living conditions in Gaza. Back to our news, and 2 Palestinians were killed and several others injured in an Israeli airstrike on a gathering of citizens in the Al-Bureik refugee camp. Local media reported that the explosion caused multiple casualties, with emergency teams quickly arriving to transport the wounded to nearby hospitals. The conditions of the injured is still being assessed. Mrs. Zaid Taim, again from The Hague, Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Q News. We apologize for the technical problem. So let me here ask you if it was possible to reach a ceasefire agreement in Gaza in the coming days and within the circumstances occurring.
There should have been a ceasefire, and there should be a ceasefire, or there could be a ceasefire in the coming days if it wasn't for the arbitrariness of Netanyahu. Netanyahu remains arbitrary in his policies because he knows very well that after the ICC ruling against him and Gallant, in fact, he knows that he is going to be prosecuted, and as well he's going to be tried for the corruption offenses that he has carried out inside Israel. In fact, the situation is catastrophic in Palestine. It's been a year and 4 months of genocidal war running in Palestine, and so there has to be some kind of a ceasefire by now. As well, the conditions that Netanyahu always lays out are actually arbitrary conditions that impede a ceasefire from being done eventually. Palestine is suffering, and the population in the Gaza Strip are suffering beyond measure. All the infrastructure, the water plants are destroyed. Even these so-called safe havens and refugee camps are not safe for Palestinians. Palestinians get burned alive in these so-called safe havens. And Netanyahu is just trying to procrastinate until 2025, until Donald Trump takes office, in order to present some kind of a gift to Donald Trump, and not really a comprehensive ceasefire.
Now, from your point of view, why has the occupation forces intensified their attacks on the Gaza Strip in those recent days?
The Israeli occupation forces are trying to galvanize its capacities to pressure the Palestinian people, and this is what Ben Gvir and Netanyahu have been saying. They want the Palestinians to be forcibly displaced. In fact, the genocidal war Israel has been waging on Palestine has not yet achieved all of its goals, being displacement, forcible displacement of the Palestinians and complete demolishing of the infrastructure of the Gaza Strip. But the Palestinian people are still standing tall and holding on to their territory despite all the genocidal practices from the end of Israel, and despite the Israelis using internationally prohibited weaponry. In fact, the Palestinian people prostrate only before God and not before any other party.
Right, that was Secretary of Fatah Movement, Zaid Taim. Thank you so much for your insights, and I guess that brings us to the end of our special coverage on the Middle East for today. Remember to stay updated by following Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EGY for the latest developments. Many thanks for watching.